Good morning. I'm very happy to talk to you today about permissions and security in PLONE. As you probably already know, PLONE is very near and dear to me, and something that I've appreciated over the years is just how secure PLONE has been. And for many deployments of PLONE, it's been something that's allowed me to rest easy knowing that the systems that I put out there were designed correctly and would not cause any embarrassment or any problems related to breaches of security. So I've been working at 6 Feet Up now for about 1.5 years, but I have actually been using PLONE since 2003 at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, where I discovered it. And a little bit before that, I actually had the pleasure of learning to use Python in about 1997. I think it was version 1.0. And little did I know that that little language that I happened to have to learn how to use for a project would become the thing that I spent most of my time using. So as you can see here, I've had a lot of involvement in the PLONE community. And at the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh, we developed, a small team of us helped develop about 350 PLONE sites, including intranets. And so you can imagine a university setting may not be the most security conscious in terms of the freewheeling distribution of research and publications that people generally want to enjoy at a university, but student data is important to keep private, and so is faculty staff data. So security has always been at the forefront of my implementation of websites using PLONE. So data security is really a very hard topic. It's kind of a scary topic. It makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. The number of security vulnerabilities in the news just becomes a blur. And what's even scarier now is that machine learning is being used to try to find more vulnerabilities. So as we have new systems, new software stacks, everything's shiny. It's a lot of fun for new developers, but really, is that the safest way to go? I'm not going to be the old curmudgeon in the room saying, don't use that new tool, but there are some good reasons why good tools, old tools, can still be good. And so, and so PLONE, yes, it's secure, it's flexible, it's content management, and it's been around for a while. It's been around since 2001. It's written in Python, which is one of the reasons why it's secure, and it's built on top of ZOP. And we have, hopefully today, Mikhail Hovitz, who's in the audience, and a number of other Zopistas, or is it Zopatistas, who have helped make PLONE really secure. PLONE has a great security track record with no zero-day ever. We have an experienced security team that's been around the block. So PLONE, yes, it's time-tested, it's robust, it's trusted by governments and large organizations around the world. So what is it that makes PLONE secure? Well, for one thing, as I mentioned before, Python is not PHP, but in all fairness, ZOP itself is actually the thing that gives PLONE that big head start in terms of security, with data security being built at the object level, and the hierarchical model for storage of objects in ZOP allows you to inherit all sorts of settings and security actually down as far down in your tree as you need. And ZODB, the ZOP object database, has a very fine-grained permission and role security model, 3 layers, security declarations required for everything. And then of course we have restricted Python, which prevents you from, or prevents your users from causing damage unintentionally, or perhaps intentionally. With restricted Python, there's a lot of hardening done when you try to add Python code, or you're customizing code through your web browser. You can unintentionally cause problems, but restricted Python, because all of these run in restricted Python, you are kind of protected from yourself. In PLONE, we use the dexterity content type framework in which all fields in an object in a schema default to the same security settings as their containing object. But of course, you can override them, as you can see here, but you do have to do some extra work. That means that you can make things more secure and more restrictive in terms of who should be able to read something and who should be able to write it. But if you just choose not to, you default back to the security settings for the object itself, which is safe. It's a good, safe assumption to be able to make. Within PLONE, there's a fine-grained permissions and roles model where when you install PLONE, you get 180 permissions or something like that. If you look on the right-hand side here, you can see just how many permissions you have, and then 10 built-in roles as well. So out of the box, you've got a very detailed way of understanding how your permissions map to these roles. And then of course you can assign these roles to individual accounts, to individual users, and to groups as well. So this is a very conceptually easy way to grasp the security that you're granting on various objects in your system. Security applies to views in PLONE, so browser views or any pages, anything that you're showing to the user that doesn't happen to be content necessarily. So for example, in this case, the site setup control panels list, you have to define permissions, and you can't actually create browser views that don't have a permission assigned. So you explicitly have to provide a permission. Permission checks are done for every view or method that's hit by an HTTP request as you're traversing, as PLONE is traversing over the URL path. And again, everything that's called is checked for authorization. As I mentioned, users and groups are not necessarily a new concept, but it's kind of surprising how not all systems actually enjoy this level of grouping of permissions of users into groups. So an example I want to talk to you about is, just briefly, is my son is a member of a robotics team here in Oshkosh. And last year, I had decided I was going to help them fix their kind of ugly, out-of-date website. And so, of course, I proceeded to talk about PLONE and how it was useful and how it was good. And I logged into a demo site to show the person in charge of the website how PLONE works. And I didn't get very far because all I had to do is I started logging in. I said, well, I'm logged in here as an admin, which means, of course, I have permission to do everything, but you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't grant that to, say, a student, for example. And she just said, what? You mean you can let different people do different things in a PLONE site? And I said, yeah. And she said, sold, we're switching over to this. So yeah, it's surprising these proprietary systems or other systems out there don't necessarily give you this safety of being able to grant someone a different level of permission from someone else. So one of the things that makes PLONE even more secure is this really conceptually simple way to declare and enforce security on objects, and that's PLONE workflow. Calvin talked about this a little bit yesterday about Django FSM. Well, PLONE's workflow, or DC workflow, is a set of states and transitions, or declares a set of states and transitions that an object would move through. So a business process, for example, where you've got, say, an expense report that you wanted to have processed by different people and verified and then approved before finally being paid. All of these states that indicate where an object is in that process and the transitions between those states, all of them are security aware. So you define the security on the object at each one of these states. And on each transition, you can define who can actually invoke the transition and under what conditions. So in the simple publication workflow, which is the default workflow for PLONE, there are only 3 states. And so it's deceptively simple. But in fact, if you look at these arrows, which represent transitions between the states, you can look in more detail we'll look shortly at the kinds of detail that you can set on those transitions. But, and a little tidbit I wanted to mention here is that Workflow Manager is a tool for PLONE that this person you may have heard of, Nathan Van Giem, originally built when we were at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. And so this was a tool that we wanted to make available to people so that we could easily visualize how a workflow looks and actually control the states and the transitions in a workflow. So when you're looking at a particular state, you can define the permissions and the roles that are affected. And so you can state, for example, here for the simple publication workflow, when an object is in pending review state, what different roles are able to do on an object. So it's very explicitly defined. It's conceptually easy to grasp. Every time an object moves into the state, you can see exactly what each different kind of person, each different kind of user or group or role will have the ability to do on the thing. The transitions between states are also guarded, so you can provide guard expressions that require specific permissions or specific roles or membership in a specific group. You can write expressions that define even more complex rules about who can even see a transition, let alone execute it. And there are events before and after, so you can run pre and post actions as an object's transition is invoked. The nice thing too about PLONE's workflow is that everything is audit trailed. I remember in Calvin's talk yesterday about Django FSM, that may or may not be an optional thing. It's easy, and I understand it's easier in Django FSM to just kind of not necessarily log an item's movement through a workflow, but with PLONE's workflow, this is something that's just part and parcel of it. So again, the idea here is that all of these tools, in particular PLONE's workflow, allow you to just know that whatever you put through a workflow is going to be done. It's going to happen in a secure way that you can also trace. PLONE ships with a number of other workflows, so you can have variations on what you want your content to do as it's being created, or as you want to make it visible to other users on your site or to the public. And of course, you can create your own. You can clone an existing workflow and then make slight variations on the security in a different state, or you could add a new state or change who can execute a particular transition. So what do we do about user-generated content? It's fine to have the logic be secure, but user-generated content can sometimes include malicious content. Well, PLONE has HTML filtering, which is part of well, comes out of the box. You can, of course, disable HTML filtering, which probably is not a very safe thing to do. I'll make a comment about that a little bit later. But in addition to just user-generated content, what other things are commonly what other common vulnerabilities affect web applications and websites? Well, PLONE has a tool called PLONE.PROTECT, which prevents PLONE from being affected by some of these common vulnerabilities. So cross-site request forgeries, cross-site scripting, clickjacking. So these are, this protection is added not just to PLONE core, but it helps protect the entire PLONE site, including any add-ons that you would have put into your installation. So I don't believe that that's necessarily the case for some of the other CMSs out there. In those cases, the add-ons are often an avenue for attacks that are often exploited. But that would not be the case with PLONE. So with all that, what happens when somebody browses a PLONE site? Well, quite a few things get checked. Well, before COVID-19, we did a lot of travel, and those TSA pat-downs can sometimes get a little thorough. Well, you can sort of see PLONE Plone security checks as secure, as thorough in that same kind of respect. A comprehensive check is done to whatever a user is authorized to do on every single object, every contained field, every traversed view and method. Plone looks at the roles assigned to the user, the groups the user is a member of, the roles assigned to the groups, permissions assigned to the roles, and so on. I mean, it's a very comprehensive security check. Of course, that does come with some computational cost. If the user is not logged in, it's a bit faster. And if you're an admin user, of course, your permission check is very, very fast because it just doesn't happen at all. So what are the best ways to de-secure or make your Plone site less secure? Well, you could do crazy things like these, where you just go ahead and publish everything on your site. You could change your site workflow to be just everything's published. You can disable HTML filtering, or you could do this insane thing that I've actually seen people do on production websites at the university, which is to grant manager role to every single user in their site. Please don't ever do these things. Whatever you're seeing here, don't ever do. And then the nice little tidbit I got yesterday from Alexander Lochel, who's a Plone security team member, is here's another way that you could actually completely deactivate Plone's security system. But of course, fortunately, it does require file system access. So don't do what Alexander is suggesting here either. So yes, my point here today is really that Plone is secure by default. We start off with all of these great reasons why: Python, ZOP, ZODB, all these fine-grained permission role maps, users and groups, workflow, object and field level permissions. I mean, you really have to go out of your way to make Plone not secure. And that really is why I feel Plone, even if a new developer, for example, isn't going to be able to implement a new application or a new web application using Plone specifically, I'm really I've been over the years so happy with what Plone has given to me and to my end users, that I really feel like new developers should be taking a look at Plone to see how things can be done in a safe, secure way. And then this is the reason why I can rest easy when I've launched a new Plone site. I just don't want to be the person on call in the middle of the night, woken up because some new vulnerability was discovered in a system that I deployed. So, okay, that's true. Plone is old, but we did put quite a bit of thought into this question of how to make Plone modernizable, if that's a word. And starting back in 2012, there was a Plone API that was first released. And then in 2014, I was at a Plone strategic summit in Bristol in the UK, where a large number of us talked about what we saw as a way to make Plone, to detach the back end of Plone and the front end of Plone, and make it possible for new things to happen either in the front end or in the back end. And then in 2016, the Plone REST API was first released by Timo Stollenberg, and that really is those two things. Oh, and by the way, I want to point out something that I discovered looking at versions. I discovered that David here was responsible for Plone API. So yes, I found yet another thing that we can blame on David. But the Plone REST API is what's allowed Plone 6 to proceed. And as I hope some of you have seen in Philip Bauer's talk yesterday, Plone 6 is going to have the new Volto front end for Plone, Volto being built on React. And so we are going to be able to use that REST API to make Plone, to give Plone that very modern front end, while still having that secure backend that's been around since 2001. So in fact, you get the best of both worlds. So we have really now with Plone 6, in fact, it's possible you can use Volto right now with Plone 5. The duality of Plone 6 is that you have this rock solid, time-tested content management system, but you also have this modern front end written in React with a very wide adoption, a large community, great tooling. And so Plone itself can continue to be a content management system, but can also be a stable, logicful backend store for essentially as a headless CMS for mobile apps. So I would encourage you, please learn more at plone.com, plone.org. There's great training materials like the ones that Philip is updating for mastering Plone for Plone 6 at training.plone.org. You can find out a lot more about Vaulto at a demo site here and docs.vaultocms.com. There are a lot of great presentations that have been made the last couple of years about Vaulto and all the great things that are happening with it. A lot of big companies in the Plone community are going full force into launching Vaulto applications and websites. And so I would encourage you to come to the next Plone conference, the annual Plone conference, which will be in Namur in Belgium in November. And please feel free, please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me or to any one of us at 6 Feet Up. We'd be very happy to talk to you about anything that any questions you might have.
Awesome, Kim. Thank you very much. I'm sure the internet is going wild with enthusiasm over the Plone security talk. I enjoyed it. Actually, there were some good comments in the Track 1 Slack room. Okay. Actually, I also did not know that restricted Python could be disabled.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
It caused a whole new realm of issues to now be spawned.
Yeah, but I won't take responsibility for that. That was freely given to me by Alexander.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for being a part of the Python Web Conference today. If those who are watching the stream right now want to ask him face-to-face questions, please join him in the gallery link below. He will be available for at least the next few minutes for anybody who has questions and wanted to get more of that face-to-face experience. All right, Kim, thank you very much. We will see you later on. You'll be around, I assume, in the Slack channels as well if anybody wants to just text you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.